I think the Inovato Quadra is the best Raspberry Pi alternative to run HamPi on at the current moment. It's inexpensive, it's easy to install, and really within just a few moments you could be up and running. In the last episode, I showed you how to get HamPi running on the Inovato Quadra. Today, I'm going to show you one of the tools or programs we could use, and that's Hamclock. So whether you want to use Hamclock alongside some other HamPi tools, you could do that. Or if you want to run this in full screen mode on your 65-inch TV, I'm going to show you how to do that as well. Finally, we're going to go through some of the features that Hamclock has to offer. This is really cool. You should look into it. Let's get started. Where we left off yesterday was HamPi, and this is kind of the main HamPi desktop, if you will. Before we jump into configuring Hamclock, we want to adjust a few things, and we're going to start off with our time. Currently, it shows 7:21, which is an accurate time, but when I started, this was showing a time like 4 p.m. because it was showing I was in European time. And in order to change that, we need to right-click on the date and the time in the upper right-hand side of the screen, go down to Properties, and here we can select our time zone. But you're going to notice that, yeah, you can't actually drop down the time zone using the blue button. So what you have to do is make sure everything's selected. It'll be selected in orange. Hit the backspace button and then type in wherever you're at. Are you in Africa? Type in Africa and find Djibouti if that's where you're at, right? But in my situation, I'm in the Americas and I'm in Chicago. So basically, I typed it in really poorly, and still, regardless, it allows me to select America, Chicago. And when I do that, I'm going to go ahead and click close. It will update the time. And that's going to be critical for Hamclock. The next thing you want to do is you kind of want to get an idea, if you don't already know, what the display size is of your monitor or your TV that you're going to be using, because that's going to be pretty critical as how you're going to set things up. So click on Applications in the upper right-hand side of the screen and go down to Settings and then Display. You're going to see that it shows I have a 24-inch monitor. I think that's because I'm using an HDMI converter. And it shows that I'm in 1920 by 1080p with a scale of 1. I have the refresh rate set to 59 hertz. But basically, 1920 by 1080p is my screen resolution. Now, it might look different because I'm using an HDMI converter, which I think I have set to 720. Anyway, it's important to kind of know what your resolution is, or you could set it in here if you need to. I want to make a note here that it's kind of critical that you do the install on whatever device you're going to be using. So if you're going to use a 65-inch TV, do the install on the 65-inch TV. So if you have to set that resolution and display, you can, and you don't have to go back after everything was configured to change it. And you'll see in a little bit that that's going to be important. At this point, you kind of have an idea for those things. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on Applications, and we're going to go down to that folder called Ham Radio. Once we're in that Ham Radio folder, this is a list of all of our tools and accessories that HamPi has to offer, thanks to W3DJS. That's a shout out. And so we're going to go here, and we're going to find our Hamclock folder. And when we find that Hamclock folder, basically we're presented with multiple options here. So you see 1600 by 960. These are different resolutions, right? So you're going to select the resolution that works for you. I'm going to select 1600 by 960 at the moment. And it says, hey, click anywhere to enter the setup. I'm going to click anywhere to enter the setup. And in all fairness, I've already set this up, so it already shows my call sign. But what you're going to see is a green arrow right next to a call sign, and it's going to be a generic call sign for you, but just go ahead and backspace everything and type in your call sign, right? I like to use the caps lock key because if you don't, it looks like this. Using caps lock, look at everything looks really nice, you know? So the next thing is to enter your latitude and your longitude, and I don't like this because, you know, then I got to go to Google, I got to look up my latitude and my longitude. What if I'm traveling, right? So what I like to use is I like to use this little secret here called IP geolocate. And click on IP geolocate where it says no, and then click yes. And what it's going to do is it's going to go on the internet then, and it's going to try to find your IP address location, and it's going to basically configure the map to your IP address location. Now, there are reasons that this won't work, like, oh, you're using a VPN, and if your VPN says you're in Australia, or you're using you're tunneling into something. Basically, or maybe even your ISP has your IP address misconfigured, and it shows you're a state away, which is a different time zone, et cetera, et cetera. So maybe IP geolocate isn't for you. You could type in manually your location, your GPS coordinates if you need to. But here we are, and the next thing it's going to say is, do we need to configure Wi-Fi? Well, if you're going to have this hooked up to a TV and you don't have an Ethernet cable running to the TV, the answer is yes. The way I'm working now, I have this hooked into an Ethernet port, which goes into my computer. So the answer is no, but I'm going to act as if I needed to configure Wi-Fi. So if I click yes here, it should give me a list of different Wi-Fi names in the area. And, if you don't see a list, or if this is confusing, where your SSID shows, you could type in your SSID. It will be case sensitive, so capital K, 50, and so forth. And then you could see there's a line below it, and it's in green right here. And it's like, well, what are you typing here? Well, the password thing is all the way over to the right on the top. So it wants your Wi-Fi password. So I'm going to type in my Wi-Fi password. And then I'm going to click done, and it's going to bring us into the next setup screen, if you will. Here at the setup screen, it's going to go through, we're connecting to your Wi-Fi. Here's your IP address. Hey, we're checking your GeoIP coordinates, and now we're finding an NTP or a time server to make sure we have you on an accurate time. It's doing all the work for us. And so we're just sitting here, and then boom, here it is populating this cool Hamclock, right? At a bare minimum, maybe you're setting this up for a family member for a Christmas gift. Christmas is coming up, right? And maybe this is exactly where you leave it because they'll want to change their own settings and figure certain things out. The cool, fun, experimental part of ham radio, whether it's computers or radios. So maybe that's where you stop at that moment. But if you want to continue on and learn about the different configurations and certain different settings you could change within Hamclock, that's what we're going to do now. First things in here, once the screen loads up, let's just put this on full screen and see how it looks, okay? So if we go to the upper left-hand side of the screen, there should be an option there for full screen if we left-click. And I think that looks pretty good. Now, in all fairness, there's a border around there, and we could probably fix all that later, maybe a different resolution. You could play with the resolutions and figure it out on your own. It should be fairly simple. But when I got this, there was some weird things on here. I mean, my call sign was in 8 different colors, and I didn't know what to do, and I didn't like it, right? So I just started clicking around, and if you go up to your call sign where it shows that color green now, you could right or left click in there, and it'll change the color to pink, yellow, white, red. I actually do like green, so I think I'm going to keep it with green. But even with that, what if we want to change our background color, right? What can we do to change our background color? I'm on the right-hand side of the screen. Notice it won't really work with the left-hand side. The left-hand side of the screen changes the foreground color or your call sign color, where the right-hand side changes the background color. Actually, I kind of like that blue and yellow. So what I'm trying to get at, though, is find the colors that work for you. Okay. Next up, we are going to talk about the time. There's a shifting of time here. So right now, you see how it says 1332, but as you recall, it was 7:30 in the morning my time. This is going off of UTC time. Am I accurate about that? Maybe. It says off, though. So what happens if we click on this off button that's right here? Okay, now it shows UTC time. If we turn it back off, I'm double clicking on that, by the way. And now I can't really double click on it. I can't do anything. So me clicking on it once changed it to UTC, but it doesn't seem like I could change it otherwise. So I tapped it once because it wasn't synced to UTC, and that's why we saw it in red. Okay, after I tapped it once, it did sync everything up with UTC time. And now if I want to, maybe I don't like UTC time, although I think UTC time is great on here, by the way. But maybe I don't want the UTC time. So if I click on the actual time, for example, I just clicked on 13, I now have the option to shift the time forward or backwards. So I want to go backwards, and I don't see the option for 6 hours, but maybe I can just hit 2 hours, and then I can hit 2 hours again. Let's see what happens, okay? So I click 2 hours, 11, that's not right still. So I click on it. I want to go backwards 2 more hours. Let's see if this works. No, it is working. See, I can go all the way back now. I'm going to try to go back 2 more hours, which will be actual Chicago time, as I call it, or whatever, right? But it's not really Chicago time, it's Central Time. Anyway, I don't like that anymore. I want to go back to UTC time. Remember that flashing off here? Double click it, boom, UTC time. And of course, the date and everything could be set as well. Now, when I get all these settings kind of like nailed in, if you will, I'm going to tap once to lock the screen. If I were to tap twice on here, when it's unlocked, so nothing happens, it just locks and unlocks it. If I just tap once, it locks it. And then if I hold down on here and then let go after a minute, it gives me the option to restart the Hamclock, exit the Hamclock, or disregard. Let's go ahead and disregard right now. And remember how I said just a second ago that, well, you know, you could actually change it back to your own time zone up here instead of UTC time. You could do that, but maybe you already saw it. This is what I want to show you next is we have this DE, and it's UTC -6 is where I'm at. So not only do I have the UTC time up above, but then I have my actual time here, and I could even set another one too. So like, let's say I wanted UTC -10, which I guess would probably be somewhere in the Pacific Ocean. If not, well, let's see. It's 3:36 in the morning, wherever UTC -10 is, which would be somewhere in the Pacific Ocean. Yeah, you see what I'm saying, though, is like I could find out what UTC zone I want to set that for DX, and I could basically have 3 different clocks on here, so I kind of know where I'm at. What happens if we right-click on any of this? We could set our latitude, longitude, and or grid. So let's go here to DX, okay? And let's try that. I'm going to click cancel here. I'm going to right-click on DX. And look at that. I could even select a list of satellites to monitor, right? So I don't have any satellites, but maybe I want to know about AO27. I don't know. Maybe I want to know about a couple. NOAA satellites are fun because you could decode those and you could see like the cool NOAA stuff on there. Anyway, let's go ahead and click OK. And look what happens. Instead of having a clock for DX, now we have this cool little NOAA, countdown essentially. We're going to see the NOAA satellite pass in 58 minutes. Huh. I'll be right back. Okay, so there was a couple of reasons I stopped the video. Number one, I was really curious about a few things. And in the future, we're actually going to be able to have an episode where we could show how to basically use Hamclock to know that this NOAA weather satellite is coming. And then we could use some of the tools like some of our software-defined radio tools and a RTL SDR in order to essentially record the passover and then decode it, put it on an image so we could see a satellite image over our area. However, now we can see that NOAA weather radio is setting in 12 minutes, and you could actually see its progression on the map. It's a little dot in orange, and you could see exactly where it's heading. So after we're done here, we're in 12 minutes. Essentially, we won't be able to contact or be able to decode NOAA weather radio. However, let's just real quick go back to where it says NOAA 19 here. We're going to right click and let's just have it showing our DX info because now this is the next cool part. Currently, I have my DX info set for HG13, which, if I look on the map, I can tell you that's near Brazil. It's over here near Brazil. And if I click on it, that green dot, I know it's 72 degrees at my rare DX location. So picture yourself, you have a summer home in a good old BK29, you lucky dog. I could actually click on the grid square on the bottom here, and I could type in where it says error. I could type in BK29. Now you're probably wondering where BK29 is, right? Well, you're about to find out. And I can click OK. Now what should happen is that cool, the green dot there is now basically showing in Hawaii because that's where Hawaii is. But for me, it's important because that's my rare DX station, and I say rare DX station because I need that one to work all states on parks on the air. But if I click on that, again, now I know it's 78 degrees at that location. However, I could just click on DE or DX over on the left-hand side. So let me cancel that. Maybe not. If I click on DE up here, I can get a bunch of information more than I ever thought, right? So all of a sudden now I have a calendar for my area, which, hey, whatever, right? I'm going to just stick with the digital 24-hour calendar, okay? And it's 0842 hours. That's kind of cool. That's my location. I don't need to know that it's EN 52 or 51, whatever it decided on. So I like that time. But down here, I do like to know what I'm looking at, BL10. Okay, so as you can see, as I click around, it's going to change probably. So let me cancel out of here. And then you can see like, oh, it's changing anywhere I click. So keep that in mind. But also recognize, let's just say BN10 was the one. When I click this lock button up here, I'll no longer be able to change that kind of stuff, which is probably a good thing, right? So that's cool. And then we'll see weather too fast on the top. Notice I was clicking around a lot of places, and this is actually going to a website, and it's using an API. And what that API is doing is it's calling a request every time you click to say, give me the weather for this location and give me the weather for that location. But the problem is it can only give you so many requests a minute, and that creates a problem. Okay. The problem being, hey, you've ran out of requests. So keep that in mind and in consideration. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and unlock this. Okay. We now know that, hey, you could check the weather at your location by clicking your little orange dot here. You know it's 23 degrees, or you can click the green dot for good old Hawaii, you lucky dog. So that's kind of that. However, if we go up to where it says 78 right now and we right click, this is kind of like a list of things that could scroll through. So I don't really care about any of this. For example, for the example, I do care actually about a lot of this. I think it's cool. But let me uncheck a lot of this. Okay, so I can't uncheck everything. I have to have one thing checked. I'm going to have live spots checked. I'm going to uncheck space weather. Live spots is really cool. I'm going to read to you what it does from the actual manual on the HamPi. Live spots is a pane choice that can overlay the map with personalized spots from whispernet.org or pskreporter.info. You may choose spots posted by your own DE call, that's your own call, or from your grid, or spots which others post of your DE call or grid. Now, we see on here this live spots map of EN51, and it even says right there, EN51. By the way, I'm not in EN51, but my IP geolocation says I am. So that is, what I was saying earlier with the IP geolocation, it might actually be off. My IP address is set to a different town, so that could be a problem. But the live spots that we're seeing right now are nothing that I've done. People from my grid square, where they're being heard in the world, which I think is great because now 10 meters is hot right now, right? So maybe I'm going to go over to 10 meters after this and I'm going to try to make some contacts. So this is really nice and I really enjoyed that. However, if I had multiple things checked here, it would my DX weather station, my DE weather station. That means, well, I really don't care about what the weather is like in Hawaii. It's always nice, right? I can get information about the moon, and we're going to click on that one, and then the solar flux and our sunspot number, I think is pretty cool. I don't care about solar or space weather for this one, but here, I think you get the point that, yes, there's a lot of information that's really good in here that you'll be able to use, and you just have to set this up to your liking. And that's why I said also a little bit ago that, like, hey, if you're giving this as a gift, maybe the best place to stop is when you had it all configured or installed initially, right? So anyway, we have this cool live spots of EN51. And if I click on that there, how am I going to get my data? I'm getting my data through PSK Reporter, but I could change it over to Whisper. Now, the spot is of the DE, but not by the DE, right? Well, we're getting the spot from the call. Now, if I were to change my call sign on here, I guess I'm going to have to maybe go make a contact. I shouldn't have said make a contact, because that would imply that you actually had to have a conversation with somebody, whereas it was just putting out your signal in a digital mode, which is throwing out your call sign, and that's what PSK Reporter's picking up. I'm aware of all that. Sorry for the confusion. It was early. Contact. And we're going to do an age of the last 30 minutes. So it'll show me the last contacts I've had over the last 30 minutes. And by the end of this episode, undoubtedly, you'll see that I've been heard somewhere in the world at some point on some band. But I like that a lot. And this is giving us the best possibility to make contacts. It's giving us a lot of information that seems foreign to us, but could really help us making our radio contacts or just get involved in radio itself. So we're going to kind of just take a look here and see 1.2. If we right click here, what else can we change here? Again, we could change these to our liking. So I want the DX weather there, and I really don't want the X-ray information here. So now I know to be jealous. Now I know it's 23 degrees where I'm at and 78 where my DX station is set to. And, again, you can change these things. But I thought it's important to kind of make a note here. Let's take a look at the moon. I can't put the moon over there. So if I wanted the moon, I'd have to put it on the left side. And I would have to do a little bit of configurations. But anyway, so I'm going to set 3 things there and just leave it as it is. And you can go through here and decide what you think is the best to put in your sections there. What is this Earth right here? Can I do anything with the Earth? No. Except if I go to NCDXF, I can click on the space weather and I can uncheck the and see what happens right here. Boom. I love that, by the way. And I would love to know where they're getting the API data from or where it's pulling from, because I have a project I'm working on and I'd love to be able to obtain that information. Regardless, though, now I have my sunspot number, my solar flux index, my X-ray, my K index. This is cool. This is basically I'm configuring things on how I feel that they should ultimately be configured. And, we can go into more depth, but I think that gives you a good idea about how this works. The fact is, right now, if we just left it as it is, everything would be fine if you were leaving it on the computer and you were leaving it on. But undoubtedly, operating systems turn off or restart or crash, or you want to put this on your TV. So let's go ahead now and write a couple of commands that are going to allow us to, and you don't have to do this, by the way, but they're going to allow us to have Hamclock start up in full screen mode automatically the next time you reboot your operating system or your HamPi distribution, And I think it's also important at that point to remind you that I'm not showing you every single thing in the world. Like, look, if I click on the moon right now, we can get a lunar evaluation at both my DE station and my DX station. So I'm not showing you everything because there is a lot of cool stuff. I will link you below to the user manual at Clear Sky Institute, which, should then in theory show everything you need to know. But I just don't have 4 or 5 hours in a video to show you everything in the world. Let's go ahead now, and we want to exit out of here. So in order to exit out of here, you could do one of 2 things. You could hit Alt F4 and it will exit out of your Hamclock. Or if you hold down the lock button for just a moment and then release, it's going to give you an option here to restart or exit Hamclock. Let's click on Exit Hamclock. Are you sure? Click Yes. Okay. And now we're going to go into essentially setting this up with a couple of commands so it starts automatically when Linux starts. So for the full screen mode on boot, I was having some issues and I contacted my buddy localhost, which pretty funny. His parents would name him localhost like they knew he was going to be a Linux guru or something. But he helped me, or he wrote a script for me that we could all use now. And in the description, I'll have this all posted. But what we want to do is we want to copy this and then paste it into a terminal window. But one of the things that localhost kind of mentioned to me was maybe you should start with the lowest resolution possible here where the exec command is, and then work your way up. I don't like listening to people, and I'm probably going to get bit in the butt for not listening to him because he is the Linux guru. But I'm going to, let's see, Hamclock, instead of using 800 by 480, I'm going to start with 1600 by 960. And again, I'm just going to copy this, okay? And after I copy this, I'm going to go up to terminal, which we already have a terminal here. I get it, but I'm going to go to the terminal. And when terminal loads up, I'm just going to paste, right click and paste. And you can see here, it's all in gray. It says make directory. All I got to do is hit enter. Okay. Now let's reboot Linux and see what happens. So we're going to go to application and log out and restart Linux. Now, and of course, we're going to have this thing where it still asks us to put in our login password information. So it doesn't necessarily really load up automatically, but we'll get there. I'll show you how you could disable a password at a local machine on login. So it basically goes straight to the Hamclock, if that's what you're looking for, of course. And it doesn't mean we can't use the other programs too, because we could always exit out of Hamclock, or we could just delete that script. I'm going to show that all to you right here. Okay, so for our password now, again, type in whatever password you've assigned if you assigned a updated password. And here it should just take a moment or two to load, and we should see a full screen. There we go, Hamclock. Now I'm going to let this all run, but you could just click skip. However, we don't have a mouse simulated. We don't have a mouse. So I'm just going to let it do its thing. And plus, it's going to update some certain things anyway, our NTP server and so forth. There it is. I mean, that's it. So very cool that we could now, if we chose to, have the Hamclock boot up on startup. Fair warning with this next part here, we're going to be disabling our password for the user Pi, which internally means people who have access physically to this machine will be able to use this machine. I just want you to know that. Keep it in mind. But with that being said, this is going to be behind my TV, and I don't think anybody's that smart to look behind my TV for a computer. So I'm going to go ahead and type in sudo passwd, which is password. And what we're going to do here is we're going to go D and then Pi. What we're doing at this point is we're basically deleting the user's password for the user Pi. And we're going to hit enter, and it says that the password expiry information has changed. Awesome. Okay. So that's our first step. Now, when we reboot this machine, it will essentially go straight to, at this moment, the HamPi desktop. And maybe you like that. Maybe that's what you want. Cool. But the next thing that we're going to do here is we're going to go to a file. And so what we want to do is we're going to do, again, sudo nano, which is an editor. And we're going to go to etsy/lightdm/lightdm.conf.d. And you could always hit tab here and it will kind of autocomplete things. So 11, and if I hit tab, it will go and it'll go to the Armbian configuration file for the user interface. I'm going to hit enter. And I already put these last two lines in, but you're not going to see those. So you're probably going to want to put those last two lines in. Auto login, by the way, that'll be posted in the description as well, equals pi for the user, and the timeout is none. Once you do that, hit Control and X, which will ask you to save the file. Click yes, and then it'll bring you back to here. You can type and exit here. Now let's reboot this machine and see what happens this time. Just so we're all aware here, it booted up. And it did go through its whole process, but after the boot up, it did go into the Hamclock. So I think the next thing that we need to do is let's run downstairs, hook this up to the TV, and see how it looks. This is why localhost said, hey, start with a small resolution and work your way up, because look at this. Wow. This is also why I told you, though, that maybe you want to configure everything with the machine that you're going to be using or the TV that you're going to be using initially, so you don't have to go through this heartache of being like, I got everything configured, now I got to go reconfigure it. All right, well, let's get this thing to boot up here, and we will try again. But I think that is a pretty good indicator of what I was saying earlier, where you might as well just configure everything at whatever machine you're going to use it. I am going to use it on the computer, so, well, actually that kind of looked cool on the TV. So if your primary goal with this thing was just to have Hamclock automatically boot up, I mean, realistically, the Inovato Quadra for $29, $39, or $49, depending on which package you get, totally, man, that's worth it. How much does a Hamclock cost if you go to the store and buy one? So maybe your whole goal was just to have it start up and boot up. And if that's the case, just remember, go into display settings in Linux, change your resolution setting to something that Hamclock will accept. Okay, because there was 4 different programs that Hamclock had with different resolutions. And then also, don't forget to go into those files that localhost has provided for us and make sure that you change the program to the correct resolution for what you set in Linux and you're opening up. I hope you get the point by now, but maybe there'll be some problems, and that's okay because we're all learning together, right? This was part 2 on the joys of the Inovato Quadra and the HamPi. And HamPi is really cool. The Inovato Quadra is really cool. This thing has been running pretty well. I did get it all configured to my liking, and now I just got to go hide some wires behind the TV. Thanks for checking this out. Long video, but I hope you learned a lot. That's my goal in these videos. Take care. Have a good one. Adios. Hasta luego. Ciao. Whatever else. Hey, 73.